As Glenn mentioned, I'm going to take you through the deck today. We're really going to talk about some of the traps we see out there with our clients that we've seen in the past, make some recommendations. They're things to think about. They're not necessarily a best approach, so I don't want to make it sound like I'm up here and I know everything, because certainly I don't. We learn something from every one of our clients that we implement at. But there are some central traps here that I would encourage you to really look out for if you're putting in place a talent management process or system. And so we're going to talk about the purpose, we're going to talk about people, we're going to talk about process and content. We'll talk about reporting and analytics and this all-important 9-box concept. We're going to focus this presentation today a lot on the appraisal form, because talent management really is driven out of that. However, near the end of the presentation, we will come back and talk about extensions like 360-degree feedback, engagement surveys, compensation planning, and some of the other pieces that come into play. So let me just get started with this, and I want to put a backdrop on this to what Glenn mentioned. First of all, we come at this from the context that there's an automated system that you're thinking of or that's going into place. We're not going to talk about ours. All we're going to say is that I don't think you can achieve this without one. That's all I'm going to say to start, okay? And you'll see why as we go through this. So just kind of going through this, first of all, what we want to look at is, we often see this, and it's kind of funny for us, because when we sell software, we go in to do an implementation after it's sold, and I get in there with the client, and all of a sudden it's, why are you guys doing this? Like, why'd you buy this software anyways? Because, you know, what's the reason that you're going to automate this process? And, you know, what we see a lot of out there is that clients, some of ours, purchase a software tool because they want to get rid of paper headaches. And that's a great reason, right? We all know that the larger organizations that rely on paper-based processes can't get a lot of great reporting out of it. It's almost impossible. So automation has to be part of the play. And I said that from the beginning, you need a database in the back end. And that's important, but that's not necessarily the main reason why we should automate this process. The tool gives you the benefit of automation. The problem, and one of the things we continue to see, is even once we automate, if people see it as a chore, if your managers and employees look at it as that once-a-year compliance process that I have to go through, you really haven't got any farther ahead, have you? So what we really think is important, and one of the things we're going to recommend throughout this presentation, is it's really about adoption. It's about thinking about the employee and manager and making sure we know how we can get them involved. And for starters, it's about communication. We've got to communicate and train about why we want to implement a talent management system, why we want to put in place a better process, what benefits are going to accrue to the organization, the manager, the employee, and everybody involved in it. And this is really the domain of the HR practitioner, the HR professional. The tool is secondary. The tool helps you achieve the objective, but the tool alone won't get you there. It's all about you and your process, your communication, and your training. There's also something out there we see a lot of before we get into it. There's an assumption that we're going to put this tool in place, or we're going to put this process in place, and our people are naturally going to gravitate towards it. They're going to know what to do. They understand the importance of it. All of our managers are good evaluators, John. And managers know their role in the process. Well, you know, I wish life was that simple. My experience has been that about 75% of the managers have no idea what they're doing. 50% of the managers don't understand why they're involved in the process. So again, we come back to this all-important communication piece. We can't just assume we have the right people that are doing the right things and they know why they're doing it. We've got to train them. We've got to talk to them about the importance of performance evaluation feedback, the importance of comments and face-to-face interaction with employees and talking about performance. We've got to back up ratings with examples. Whenever we give somebody a written rating, it's not good enough just to put a rating on there. It's not good enough just to make a comment. You need a behavioral example that supports the rating you gave, and we want to talk to the managers about that. We want to analyze their ratings. We want to challenge them on their ratings. We want to illustrate how their results and how their ratings contribute to the management of talent in the organization. And this is all part, again, of the HR communication domain that needs to happen. From a process perspective, if we've got people and a concept in place and we're saying, you know what, you know, we know we've got the right reasons to do this and we know we can work with our people to get this done, what we want to talk about next is the process that's in place. And how many people out there miss this all-important employee self-assessment piece? We see it a lot. You know, how many people out there believe that a once-a-year check-in is good enough? We see that a lot. You know, how many people out there, again, believe that a good software tool can replace a face-to-face meeting? You know, we never recommend that, but we see that assumption in places. And we really have to watch out for that. Because that's a big, big trap to fall into thinking, again, that the software is going to make it happen, that, hey, it's really not that important that we meet and talk about it. As long as it's documented somewhere, it'll get used by the right people at the right time. That won't work. So what we're going to recommend and what we're going to ask you to think about is a process that keeps people involved and thinking about performance and talent throughout your year or throughout your evaluation cycle. Beginning of the year, the really simple thing to do is to have a goal setting stage, right? We set goals up at the beginning of the cycle. We give some challenge goals, we give some goals that are attainable, and we set them up, we document them, put them in a plan. We encourage a quarterly check-in where the employee and manager get together and they just talk about how they're progressing towards meeting those goals. At the end of the cycle, we ask the employee to come back and assess themselves first. And that's critical, because the only way you're going to get employees to buy into this process is if they're involved at the beginning in setting up their goals and objectives, if they're involved throughout the cycle and you know, making sure they're meeting them, checking in and doing it, and if they're involved in giving themselves a rating with explanations and reasons. That has to happen. The employee has to be in the process. It's a relationship. If you don't have the employee in the process, there's no relationship. It's a one-way dialogue between your head and your pen or your hands, and that's not going to do anything for you. Okay? So we want to talk about getting employees involved every chance we get, and we also want to talk about the fact that if we automate this process, the face-to-face meeting doesn't go away. What it does is it gets us ready for the face-to-face meeting. It gets us prepared. It gets us going into a meeting where we know the content and structure of what we're going to be talking about. As an employee, I go into the meeting knowing that there's a standardization, a level of standardization and fairness in the organization. That other people under other managers in other departments and in other locations are going through the same process that I'm going through. There's a level playing field, and that's critical, absolutely critical. Of course, we want final comments in there as well. So we want to think the important thing about process is people involvement from beginning through the cycle and at the end. That's really, really critical. Content is the biggest area of confusion we see, I can tell you, hands down. When we look at this stuff, content is the biggest area of confusion because we go to these trade shows and we go to these learning events and we go to seminars and we hear all about, you know, the importance of competency-based assessment, about getting the content right, about the right library. We see a lot of focus at our client sites and with prospects on descriptive narrative. Call it descriptive narrative. Writing the perfect competency definition, as if that's possible, right? A focus on, you know, every demonstration, Glenn, I don't know if you get this over here, in North America, in Ottawa, Canada, where I'm from, almost every demonstration we do on this software, they ask us, how many competencies do you have in your competency library? And I'm sitting there thinking to myself, well, why does that matter? Why does that matter? Because you want me to write all the descriptions for you? You want me to give you the vanilla approach to the performance appraisal? I don't know your organization at all, but I'm going to wave a magic wand, look at my competency dictionary and say, you know what? These people, those 4 competencies. These people, those 6. That's not the way it works, right? That's not the way it works. So what really matters when we look at content here is that your people understand it, that they can relate to it, that when they look at it, somebody in a position is going to say, yeah, you know, that's a good way to describe the behaviors needed to be successful in my position. You know, I sign up to that. You know, if I was going to hire somebody to replace me, those are the attributes and characteristics I'd be looking for. That's what we need to get to. So the question then is going to become, how do we get to that?